Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to another episode of Dragon's Gold, the magic of mindset. Today we have the pleasure of having James Bohan, the founder of Stonehan Capital Family Office, as well as Stonehan Accountancy. James, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me on, Justin. Excited to be on this Dragon's Gold podcast.
Thank you, my friend. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here with us, and I'm really excited to help share your story. And so, to that point, let's dive in. Let's go right to the origin story. Where did it all begin for James?
Where it all began for me was just really growing up in a real estate family. I've always been interested in property development, looking at the world from an economist lens. I remember my dad saying when I was 6 years old, I said I wanted to own a Blockbuster video because I'd still get to keep the movies and people would pay me rent. Not a great long-term vision with the internet coming along, but I had the idea of an owner's and property owner's mindset from a young age and watched them develop a lot of homes and apartments all over Southern California and Nevada, and just grew up learning about real estate at the dinner table. And it was something that really spoke to me and was a great thing to do and learn with the family.
That's awesome. Family is huge, and for them to be able to help share that with you at such a young age, and for you to be hungry to take that knowledge and have the fire to move forward with that. So, speaking of that fire, when did you know in that moment? I love that Blockbuster story. When did you know that you wanted something more, and what steps did you take to achieve that?
Probably when I was like 15 or 16, or even, in my late teens when I was interning at a property management company. I was working in the insurance compliance department, and my boss was like, "Where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? Or where do you want your career to go?" I'm like, "I want to be the CEO of my own company." It's just always been embedded with me, kind of just as my character as I've come of age, where watching my whole family be entrepreneurs meant that I didn't really want to work for a big company or for other people my whole life. Granted, I did have a great career working for institutional shops like KPMG and a private equity fund out in Los Angeles. And those were a great way to learn and cut my teeth learning about real estate from a fund manager's perspective, and has helped kind of hone my vision and my career path.
Fantastic. So, in that, as you were honing that and cutting your teeth, what trials, what obstacles, we call it the gauntlet, what are some of the things that you had to overcome on that journey?
Geez, accounting careers and CPA firms are, challenging and a grind. When you're working in there, you're working, 60 to 80 hours a week during busy season. And, that can be exhausting. But, just knowing to keep your head down, that this is going to lead to something great in your life is something my dad always taught me. He said, "Yo, go get your CPA license, and then you can write your own ticket in life and go anywhere you want with a career like that." And it's so true. And I've been trying to tell other people like that who are graduating from college, maybe they don't know what they want to do long term. I really recommend to people go become an accountant and a CPA, work for a public CPA firm where you can see lots of different industries, and then specialize in one. You become an expert in the language of wealth for that, accountancy and finance. And then from there, you can, go to grad school like I did. I say go and getting your MBA, or I got a master's in real estate development. It helps kind of set the reset button on your career, and people will just stop looking at you as an accountant, but now they look at you as an MBA. And then you can go take this industry specific knowledge you've learned from literally the nuts and bolts of building out these financial statements and profit and loss reports and balance sheets, and taking all this really insider knowledge, and then go sit on the other side of the table working in industry, and then eventually starting your own company, or partnering up with someone to launch something. And so I believe accounting is such a great foundational career for anyone who wants to go into business for themselves one day.
I absolutely agree. It's not something that a path I followed, but I can absolutely see the merit and benefit in doing it. I think it's amazing. I'm curious, when you were going through the aspect of getting that basics and learning those nuts and bolts, did you always hold the vision of you being the founder and CEO of your own company? Did that vision ever waver? Did it ever change? And if so, how?
A little bit. I've learned more as I become a Christian and become more of a man of faith that God will always just show you the next step. He won't show you the whole path. And that's something that I've just naturally walked my whole life. And, when I was at the CPA firm, my idea was to just get in there for 2 years, get my CPA license and get out. But I worked for such a great company that I potentially saw a path to partnership there, just given the great firm culture. We eventually got by KPMG, and at the same time I went and got my master's in real estate development. So it wasn't the ultimate goal at that. I mean, it wasn't something that I saw an alternative path is what I'm trying to say, versus then I always wanted to go on my own, just because I was surrounded by a bunch of great people at this firm called Rothstein Cass, which really specialized in hedge funds, private equity funds. And then given my background with my family, I slotted into real estate funds. And that's what also kind of set my mind of wanting to get onto that side of the table of working in private equity real estate.
That's amazing to be able to have those opportunities and those connections, those people that you were able to work with. And so to that point, we call it the fellowship. It's the mentors, the allies, the people that go along the journey with us. In your experience, who would you say were some of the most inspiring people that helped you on your journey?
This one gentleman, Stanley Eisman, the founder of American Realty Advisors, he manages billions of dollars for real estate. And I had the honor and privilege of working for him as his CPA, well, not personally, but I worked on a lot of the tax returns that his fund invested in when I first started with Rothstein Cass. And then when I went to grad school at USC, he was my professor for asset management. So I kind of got to see kind of behind the scenes of his operations a little bit, and the inspiration for me to get into private equity real estate and then actually go and learn it from him directly in grad school was amazing. And this guy's, a big thinker. He's super kind to people, treats his staff well, and he's been a great guy to learn from during my career.
Incredible to be able to have someone that helps to show you the way, and you also, not just by explaining it, but also by doing it and being able to get into the trenches and learn with them and see that behind the scenes, right? Pull the curtain back and know how things unfold from the ground up. Speaking of ground up, creating your own companies, and the way that you've gone about that, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced in that growth, and how did you overcome them?
Great question. So when I left my job as the CFO of a private equity fund, it was my intention to partner up with someone to start our own fund. This was like in 2019. But for one thing or another, that kind of fell out through no fault of my own. And I kind of had to go back to square one and figure out, hey, what am I going to do with my life? So in that year 2019, I started up Stonehan Capital. I was going to go, raise money for opportunity zone deals, and just ended up not having that job or that role fit my personality so well. At the same time, I started, my CPA firm, where I had an old friend who was a client back at Rothstein Cass reach out to me and say, hey, I've gotten, really bad service and really bad help while you've been gone, or I had to go with someone else because, you left the firm, and they got by KPMG and who was too small for them. He said, hey, can you help me out again? And I said, yeah, of course. I needed the money, honestly. And the CPA business kind of grew from then in 2019 to where it's a really great practice now.
I think it's amazing that how things in life happen, and when you had an opportunity to help that person who needed the help, right? It was symbiotic in that you both benefited from the experience, right? And in that, you also get to learn, to grow, to strengthen your skill set in regards to what you're operating with. And then your company becomes more and more of a formidable force in the space. That didn't come from nothing. It took a lot of time, effort, and energy on your behalf. And through those moments, I'm curious, is there a moment in particular, I call it the darkest hour. Is there a moment where you thought, I'm going to throw in the towel. This isn't for me, and I just want to quit? And how did you overcome that?
A couple busy seasons ago, when I didn't have as much help as I do now on the production side to get tax returns done, it was just it was a huge grind. really late hours during tax season. And, I thought about just, selling the firm and moving on and just focusing on real estate 100% of the time. But getting through that and then talking to my clients again and having them express how much they valued my service and how much they appreciated, working with me, given the horror stories they've had with other CPAs, meant a lot to me and kind of made me realize there was, a bigger purpose here and it's worth kind of the trials and tribulations to help people. Had a lot of resistance getting back into having my own CPA firm and internally, but God has just set out the path for me to where it's just been kind of easy, I'd like to say, to grow the business and find people who need help and really trying to focus on the joy and the fulfillment that I give to clients of giving them good service has made this career much more rewarding to me. And focusing on that instead of focusing on the grind of a busy season is what really helps me get through the career.
I think what you said there is so impactful. When you think about perspective, it's the same thing, but through a different lens, right? It doesn't make it any less daunting of the amount of work you have to do. But when you find the joy and the passion and you're helping people, that same thing suddenly takes on a whole new light. It's a fuel for the flame, right? It helps to keep that fire burning and burn even brighter. I can only imagine the people that have benefited from your perseverance in this, having stuck it through, now the opportunities that you've been able to help them achieve an experience. They told you the horror stories that they've had, right? And they would have had to just keep going on and finding out. And when it comes to the taxes, right, it's a war, it's a battle that has to be fought, right? And you want a strong person who understands the strategy of war, the tactics to go through. And that, while that may sound aggressive to some, anyone who's really had to run the gauntlet of what it is to try and protect their money, right? Because it's not just what you make, it's what you keep. And so in that experience, is there anything that you can share with our listeners that you've experienced along that, and any lessons you might be able to share?
It is total war. I agree with you. And I have had that warrior spirit in me my whole life. I didn't really realize how much, and I had that in me until the pandemic hit. I had to choose which word I wanted to use for that. And I had a call to action of getting out of California where there was a complete lack of freedom and moved to Idaho where there was a large amount of freedom. And kind of during this quest, I owned one gun before the pandemic and now own several. And during that whole time, I never thought of myself, before that, really thought myself of someone who ever wanted to be in the military or go to war or any of that. But I become really trained through great people up here in Idaho, where I become really proficient with weaponry and adopted a warrior mindset in that way, above and beyond just believing that I'm a warrior and fighting for my clients' behalf against the IRS. My friends and I joke that I'm the tax hero and we got to go slay the tax demon. And that's how we kind of joke around when I'm talking about what I'm doing right now. And they give me encouragement to go fight the good fight.
That is amazing. And it so aligns with everything that I stand for, this entire podcast, my own personal preferences. Like, I love it. Amazing. Well, I think you are a hero, my friend. And I appreciate you sharing your journey with us today.
Yeah, I like to say, call me the tax hero because I'll make your tax zero.
That is amazing. You just burned that into my mind, brother. That's amazing. Let's talk a bit about achievements, Dragon's Gold, things that you've experienced and the benefits that have come from it. I know you shared with us joy and being able to help people, and I think that is priceless. What are some of the things that you've learned through your journeys and that you can take away from that, both in mindset and rewards?
I've had something happen to me over the past couple weeks that just shows a mindset that if God wants something for you in your life, he'll make it happen. So for example, I was under contract to buy an investment property here and had someone lined up to help me buy the property because the close accelerated due to negotiations. I was able to knock some off the purchase price, but then they're like, hey, well, you need to close faster and end your contingency period. And I said, okay. I talked to a person who's going to provide the financing for close and was going to pay them back with, the mortgage and some other investor money. But lo and behold, 4 days before close, this person says they don't want to do that anymore. And here I am, like on a Friday, close is set for Tuesday. I have a weekend to figure it out. So luckily that happened Friday morning. And I basically said, well, if God doesn't want me to have this deal, so be it. I'll lose my 20 grand earnest money and on to the next one. And lo and behold, though, by the end of the day, I found a new hard money lender. I had a client who I've been talking to about being the GC on the project. I had a dinner scheduled with him that night to kind of talk about the deal. I'm like, hey guys, sorry, I might lose this one, And they said, okay, well, no, if you get that hard money loan, we can put up the rest of the money. How much money do you have? And so I literally scraped together, like I had to come up for like 98K for my share. And I literally pulled together like every last dollar I could and put it all in one bank account to say like, okay, can I make this happen? And it literally came to like $98,400. I'm like, okay, that's a sign that God wants me to have this deal. God wants me to go into partnership with, my client and get this deal done. So, you never know if people are going to do what they say they're going to do. And so by Saturday, I had everything kind of worked out with the hard money lender. The docs got together on Monday. And then Tuesday, everyone wired in as they said they were going to, which was rewarding and refreshing. I'm like, wow, it actually did come together. And, I surrendered to God at the beginning, like, hey, if this isn't for me, I get it. That's okay. And he ended up, helping me find a path to make it happen.
What an inspirational story on so many levels. The lessons that I just heard, myriad, but recognizing that you can't control other people, you don't know what's going to come, finding the acceptance to understand that you cannot control everything, having faith in whatever power you believe in the infinite intelligence, in God, regardless of who or what the belief is, finding the strength to have that ability to surrender, to recognize that, to control what you can, and accept the things you can't. But you didn't stop. You didn't just sit down and say, well, it's just going to happen. You still took action. You still did everything you could to scrape that together. You pushed, right? And you through the combination of your grit, your perseverance, right? The team, right? The greatest things in life don't happen alone, right? And whether that's with the people that we surround ourselves with or a higher power, right? All of that came together and it worked out for you. And I think that there's so much power in the story you shared. And I'm also incredibly happy that it worked out for you, brother.
Thank you. And it also led to new business relationships because, I now have this new hard money lender who I'm, talking to you about some potential other financing. And then I also, was calling my best friend up as well. And I had asked him to invest in the deal as a equity investor. And then he started to underwrite it as a lender if he was going to come in and potentially save me to get the deal closed. But it was too short of an underwriting period for him, which I totally understand. But I'm just really happy and thankful that we got the deal done one way or another.
And I as well, on your behalf, and the investors that invested with you and all the people that benefited, right? The people who sold you the property, right? Like, you, obviously they were selling for a reason. So you were able to come through and you're able to help them in whatever their needs or the reason is that they had to part with that property. But also, I love what you said about the additional relationships, right? Through crisis comes opportunity. And so in a situation where you were able to make these new relationships, that now will reap additional fruit in its own way, which is going to help you in the future, but it's also going to help the people you're working with, right? And when you come at it from a point of kindness is so important, and you mentioned it earlier, and I think that going at it with the right heart in anything you do makes it such a richer experience for you and the people you work with. And that as well helps to build those tighter bonds and relationships that will bear those fruits later. So
Absolutely.
super grateful for you sharing that story. So we know what just happened, but let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what is the next quest for James Bohan and his companies.
Gosh, that's a great question. So during this year, I've spent a lot of money, time, and effort investing in the operations of my CPA firm. I hired a great marketing team, BAMP Technology, through some masterminds. I met them. They just get me, they get my personality, they understand the business, and it's been really cool. I just hired 3 more staff to help with the busy seasons coming up. And that was a really rewarding experience because I went out to only hire one, but I ended up getting 3 really qualified candidates, and I just decided to hire them all. And, I might not have all the work to fill them up to 100% capacity right now, but I see the trajectory of where business is coming in and where I'm at, and just kind of some confidence in myself to generate that business, and knowing God will provide if it's a righteous journey and righteous quest. Where I hired them all, I'm like, okay, this gives me a little bit of runway to train them up over the next year, because I know as soon as I do all this advertising stuff, the inbound request for work greatly outpaces capacity when you start advertising in the CPA world. So I have that to look forward to, a great team that I'm building out, and future clients. And then on the Capital Family Office side, I'm going to hopefully be working with my best friend to look at some more acquisitions out here. There's already one that's kind of been floating around that we're talking about that we're going to make a run at here in Q1, and just kind of getting all the operations style of my accounting firm, getting this investment I just closed on, the value add strategy executed, and just kind of leveling up and getting things operational and operationally very efficient. With that in mind, I also just subscribe to a new accounting software, Oracle NetSuite. I figure at the level I'm operating at, like QuickBooks and QuickBooks Online is just too, for lack of a word, lowbrow. And where I'm at and where I want my investors to be at is something where you can hit a button and see your whole net worth, or hit a button and see all your companies in one report. When you're using QuickBooks Online and you have like 5 different LLCs for 5 different properties and 5 different management companies and 5 different GPs all associated with them, it's really hard to put that all together. You need the full-time staff, and that's their only job to do it if you're using QuickBooks Online. So if you're able to leverage some better enterprise technology, such as Oracle NetSuite, I believe I'll be able to get my investors, great CFO KPI dashboards with the login, and then be able to give them their whole portfolio, their whole world view with just a few clicks of the button, instead of saying like, hey, accounting staff, I know you just finished all the books for all these 10 entities, now go roll it up. And I hope you don't make any mistakes when you do it.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mistakes never happen. Yeah.
No.
So I love that you have been talking about some resources, some tools that you're using. And so in that, what would you suggest or help to share with the listeners? Any books or tools, weapons, things that you've utilized that you feel might benefit them?
Oh gosh, I've been way more into the doing than the researching. One book I read a really long time ago in my career was Rework. I forget the name of the author, but it's kind of all about just looking at different ways of doing business, and the old business models are kind of dead. And it's all about like, why do you have like team wide meetings where everyone shows up? And if everyone like bills out at $100 an hour and you have 60 people in there, like that meeting for an hour just costs you $6,000 in productivity. And how many people were really engaged and dialed in? How many people needed to hear that? Just if something can be an email instead of a meeting, send the freaking email. Try to be efficient in that way. I read the Bible as much as I can. There's a lot of great wisdom in there. Even looking back to Genesis, there's stories of human nature that still exist today. But the Bible has a lot of great wisdom in it that is applicable. There's a lot of good leadership qualities of Joseph coming out of Israel into bondage in Egypt, where, he had the vision where he was going to be a leader and his brothers were going to be, at worshiping at his feet or looking up to him or whatever. But he had to go to Egypt where he was a slave and then became the Pharaoh's, head man of the country. And then he got put into prison because he was accused of rape by the Pharaoh's wife, or attempted rape. When she was trying to come onto him, she said, "Oh no, he was trying to come onto me." And then he was in literal prison for 2 years, and then until he got out of there, and then he was able to, bring his family and brothers into Egypt during 7 years of drought. And instead of, taking vengeance on them for having them sell him into slavery, he was very kind to them and gave them a place to live, and was just very, very generous, and chose the kind route. So knowing that things take time and they don't happen on your plan, but God's plan, was a great lesson I pulled from that story of Joseph in Genesis. Another book I just read that I keep talking about this book is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And he's a great Stoic philosopher and author. And as I was starting this starting this endeavor of getting online into social media and LinkedIn and Instagram and look at me and I'm so cool or whatever, I can't stand that aspect of social media. Like, I was off of it for 10, 12 years before I re-engaged strictly for business reasons. And reading that book at the same time I was launching that has really helped keep my mind grounded and make sure I'm not trying to delve into that kind of negative attitude that is so prevalent on these social media pages.
Thank you for all of that. I completely empathize with so much of what you said. And one of the things I'll mention when you talk about Joseph being kind, right? Not taking vengeance, recognizing that again, he couldn't control how other people treated, but he could control how he acted about it, right? And how much lighter your heart is when you come at something with that forgiveness, right? And how powerful it makes you to have that level of control over yourself. I think that if more people had that kind of mentality, well, frankly, this world would be a much better place. But I'm glad that there are some people that do have that ability. And I think that the more that we ourselves can be empathetic to that, we can emulate that kind of behavior, the greater it is, and the ripples that come from it, and the people that we're able to come in contact with benefit from that. I think that the stories that you've shared today are really going to help a lot of people. And I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. Yeah, the Bible version I've been reading lately is the Maxwell Leadership Bible. So it takes these passages and then talks about how these stories relate from a leadership perspective, and Moses being a reluctant leader, but he was called to action by God. And so it's been a cool way for me to get some extra insight out of the Bible more than just the passages.
Can I ask, is that John Maxwell?
I believe so.
Yeah, that rings true to me. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I've not heard of that, so I'd be interested to look into that myself. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask, I only got a couple more questions, my friend. One is, we call it passing the torch, right? It's the impact, it's legacy. And I like to call it the Hall of Heroes. If someone were to walk through and see a statue of James Bohan there, what message would you want to convey? What would you want it to say?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know. When I think of statues, I always think of the poem of Ozymandias, King of Kings, where there's just this inscription left and he's talking about how great he is and everything he's built, but it's just a bunch of ruins, and it's just showing nothing lasts forever. Gosh, if I was going to have a statue of, I would want to put on there, the best lesson my dad ever taught me is quitters never win and winners never quit. And it took me a minute to really understand that, because if you quit, obviously you're not going to win. But like, if you don't ever quit, eventually you will find success. You might have some failures and things that set you back, but as long as you don't quit, you don't lose. And when I was at the CPA firm, I was like kind of looking around, and the people who made partners were the people who just stuck around. The people who didn't quit along the way. And it's just so true. And just thinking about the logic behind that statement. And if you do quit, you're never going to win because you're not in the game anymore. But if you're still in the game, still trying to move the ball forward, eventually you will win. And what winning looks like or what success is to you might change along the way. But if you never quit, you will eventually win.
Absolute gold, James. Absolute gold. Thank you to your father for sharing that lesson with you. And thank you for sharing that lesson with our listeners. Completely agree. Thinking about that, anybody who wants to do something that they're passionate about, it will not be easy, but you push yourself forward. And if you don't quit, you will succeed. It's inevitable because you will never throw in the towel. You will never stop until you achieve your goal of success, whatever that is to you. And I love how you made the point too to say that that may change along the way, because I think it does. As we grow, as we experience new things, as our horizons change, the vision of what we see, both outward but also inward, it's significant, that growth that we experience and the opportunities that we allow ourselves to take, the doors that open, the things that we allow ourselves to experience will impact not just you but other people around you. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have the chance to talk to you today and to allow you to share this story, because I know how much value I've gained from it. I can only imagine what our listeners are going to gain. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been great to share these messages.
So I got one more thing I'm going to ask, and I'll
Okay.
tell you, my friend, this is my favorite question to ask at this point. If you were to be any mythical creature, what would it be and why?
Well, it's obviously a dragon because I want to build a castle and I love gold.
Done. The best answer. Granted, I'm incredibly biased for many reasons. For many reasons. It's not something that I share often, but James, you and I have talked about it, and so I resonate. But I will build a castle, and I believe that you will as well. And perhaps these are things that people think that we're talking like the proverbial, no, like the real deal. Totally aligned with everything you said. Like, this is by far one of my favorite interviews. That's not a knock on anybody. That's just to say, like, your messages align so much with my value set, and I love the how much it aligns with my brand. So super grateful to have you on here today, and I'm grateful to call you friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Likewise.
Yeah.
Hey, and if any of you listeners want to get a hold of me, my website is stonehan.com. Stone, like a stone castle. Han, like Han Solo. So stonehan.com. And we just put together a 50-point questionnaire for every real estate investor to go through and ask themselves if they're looking at everything. And that you can download that checklist by going to 50taxquestions.com. Once again, that's 50taxquestions.com. And thanks again for having me on, Justin. It's been great to kind of share some of the life lessons I've learned over my career.
It's been a pleasure, James. Thank you, my friend. Perfect. My friends, thank you for joining us once again on this quest to inspire, educate, and empower you to turn your dreams into reality, one mindset shift at a time. We'll see you next time.